Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Nash, and I'm Director of Strategy and Policy at the ECITB, and I'm delighted to be your host for OGV Energy Live this afternoon on the topic of skills and training. And thank you too for bearing with us. We had a few technical hitches just moments before we were going to go live, and the link wasn't working. So thanks very much for bearing with us. Just for those of you who don't know, OGV Live is an interactive show which aims to deliver news and insights from the energy sector by bringing to life the UK's leading energy sector publication, OGV Energy Magazine. And as I've said, this month's edition of the magazine is focused on skills and training, and I will very shortly be welcoming our guests and contributors to talk to you today about this topic. Before I do that, I'd just like to introduce you to my employer, the ECITB. So for those of you who don't know, the ECITB is an employer-led skills and standards body in Great Britain. We're a non-departmental public body sponsored by the UK government, and we exist to support the training and development of workers in the engineering construction industry in Great Britain and train them against a range of craft, technical and managerial disciplines. We do that by investing funds raised through an industrial training levy. We invest about £28 million a year in training the workforce and helping employers address skills gaps and shortages. And this workforce is the workforce that really underpins the energy sector. It is responsible for designing, maintaining, building and decommissioning some of the industry's biggest and most important infrastructure. And the offshore energy industry is and has always been a very, very important sector for engineering construction. I should also say finally that ECITB have a global arm for those of you joining us from overseas. Through that arm, we deliver a wide range of training products and services to overseas clients across 6 different continents. So suffice to say, with all of that background, it's really important that we as an organisation get the latest insights from experts in the field in terms of what the skills needs of the energy sector are, and that is really fundamental to us being able to deliver against our mission. Anyway, that's enough from me on the ECITB. We've got 2 fantastic panel discussions lined up for you today. The first of which is what OGV call its headliners section, and that will feature Michael Farrell from OPITO, who many of you will know, and Neale Farman from Robert Gordon University. And then after that panel session, we'll then be joined by Craig Smith from Comet Analytics, formerly STC in CISO, Craig Coutts from Wilkinson Coutts, and Andy Watson from MRS Training. And that will be our spotlight session where we get to delve in a bit more detail with our participants as to how they and their companies are helping the industry deliver the skills and training it so vitally needs. I should say this is an interactive session, so we're very much keen to have your thoughts and contributions, and I'd ask you to use the message function that you'll see on your right-hand side to ask any questions that you might have for our participants, and I'll obviously be keeping an eye on that, and I will raise any of your questions on your behalf to our participants as I see fit. So really looking forward to a really, really fantastic set of discussions today. And I'll start then the first session, our headline guests, by introducing both Michael and Neale. Can Michael and Neale, there you are, you're joining us as we speak. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Can I ask you just very briefly to introduce yourselves, starting with you, Neale?
Yeah, hi everyone. So thanks so much, David, and good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here representing Robert Gordon University in an area which is obviously really important to us, and giving an overview of the ways in which we can provide the energy sector with workforce development support. So as you said, David, Neale Farman, Business Development Manager. What my role is essentially is to be the key conduit between the university and the energy sector. So I facilitate all collaboration, so whether that's research, innovation, or primarily for this conversation, skills and training. A little bit of context about why this space is so important to us as a university is we sort of pride ourselves on being industry informed in everything that we do. So in particular, when it comes to teaching and learning, key indicator of this is really our graduate employability rate. So that's 96%. So the highest in Scotland and top 3 in the UK, really demonstrates that we want our graduates to have the skills and capabilities to be equipped to go directly into industry and make a positive impact and contribution. Obviously, for this conversation, the energy sector is of key importance to us.
Thanks very much, Neale. That's a really thorough introduction. Mike, can I turn to you now to introduce yourself?
Hi, David, and thank you to OGV Live for inviting me along today. And I'm representing OPITO. I'm a Global Qualifications Manager for OPITO, and my role entails ensuring compliance at our approved centres around the world for delivering the global qualifications. And key, obviously, is developing the skills for various markets around the world and for various infrastructure and supporting the governments. So we work very closely with the governments, legislative bodies and SMEs to develop our qualifications and standards, which helps us then to roll them out to our approved centres.
Thanks very much, Mike. And I think with both you and Neale on the panel today, we've got a significant amount of expertise and no doubt differing perspectives from two different parts of the education system. So looking forward to a really good conversation. And I'll start just by asking you, Neale, if I may. Obviously, I think many callers or many of our participants or our audience today, rather, joining the call will be aware of the work of RGU and particularly some of the groundbreaking work you've done in recent years with your Energy Transition Institute on looking at workforce dynamics and looking at what the skills needs of the energy industry are, both today but in the future. Based on those insights and that data, what are the sorts of biggest skills and training issues you think the industry is facing today?
Yeah, so we are really, really fortunate to have Professor Paul DeLue and the Energy Transition Institute at RGU. And like you say, they've done some world-leading workforce dynamics research, released a number of publications over the past few years. And just recently, they're delivering our Energy Future publication, which kind of looked at a wider slant of of a huge range of different energy pathway scenarios and how that then impacts and what the implications would be on workforce, economic contribution, and the supply chain to really get an overview of what the best and most adequate, just and fair transition would look like. That's supported not just ourselves as a university inform us what our workforce development strategy is, but it's also informed UK and Scottish governments on policy planning. It has really highlighted the need for us to get it right. So, for example, some of the figures from those reports. If all UK government targets are realised, in 2023 there was 154,000 people employed by the offshore energy sector in the UK in 2023. All being great and meeting those targets, by 2030 we'll have close to 225,000, which obviously for us as a university is an amazing outlook, because it means that we are correct to continue to develop and put a real emphasis on developing talent for the offshore energy sector. But it also means that, we need to get it right, because, there's lots of different energy pathway scenarios looked at. The less energy targets realised, that number of jobs goes down. So we really need to focus on getting it right, making sure that we have the same number of workforce and as well economic contribution of that sector. The transferability of skills has also been analysed there. So, some of the great work has looked at and researched what skills are currently in the offshore energy sector. And the answer to that was around 90% of medium to high transferability of skills that are currently in the sector. Brilliant news for us, because that means a lot of the content that's already in our top programs is still relevant. And, we've got to then review to say, what is that difference to make up that 10%? Is it short courses? Is it adapting our existing courses, or is it adapting new pathways to our established programs? The issue is of course, we don't know exactly what that makeup of the energy sector looks like in future. So yes, there's lots of these different pathways, and we've worked out what the different workforce makeup then looks like, but we don't really have clarity on what that exactly is. So working that out is a really crucial aspect for us to then be able to refocus, reshape all our courses to be able to meet those needs, both current and future workforce demands.
Thanks, Neale. Yeah, absolutely. The big uncertainty is what will the energy mix look like in concrete terms moving forward. And just turning to you, Mike. I mean, you mentioned that OPITO do a lot of work with governments around the world, including the UK government. I'm very conscious that we have audience members from overseas, but obviously in the UK we've had a change of government recently. We've had announcement today from the Prime Minister that he's bringing forward legislation to introduce Great British Energy, which will be a publicly owned energy company that will have a remit to turn Britain into a clean energy superpower by 2030. What are your thoughts, Mike, on what the change of government might mean for, particularly for the workforce, the skills and workforce policies that we'll need to see in the UK over the course of the next few years?
Yeah, early days, obviously, new government. We do have their manifesto, and as you said, their strapline is to make Britain the clean energy superpower. As you know, OPITO has been at the spearhead of guiding the skills requirement and development for the North Sea Energy Transition Deal. And in doing that, we went through a process of developing 4 new qualifications to support the energy transition. And that was under carbon capture utilization, wind, solar, and hydrogen. And we rolled them out across the colleges in Scotland and England. And our focus this year, obviously, is to target Wales, Northern Ireland, and the rest of Ireland. So with that said, we've developed the wind and the solar to a technician level. We have the 4 introductory modules for all 4, and we've embedded them into apprenticeship programs. We're rolling them out into STEM programs as well. So as Neale said there rightly, 90% of the transferable skills from the ongoing energy sector, oil and gas, into the new energy sectors is not a huge issue. Everybody's panicking. There's a bit of a scaremongering, especially in the oil and gas industry, that there's not going to be a job for them, but that's not the case. There is that 10% that we need to look at for upskilling and new skills development. So with the hydrogen, it's a wee bit of grey area because the technology is not being fully developed. So those equipments, that innovation, and the processes and procedures behind all of that need to be developed so we can develop a qualification that's suit to fit the job. And the same with, if we look at carbon capture, there's various methods of capturing carbon and obviously utilizing it as well. So it's still a bit of grey area in those two, but as I said, with the wind and the solar, we have up to a technician level. So that's to support the energy transition. It's to support that upskilling, and it's to support any new skills to develop for the energy transition.
Thanks, Mike. And obviously, Scottish Government, UK Government more broadly have placed a significant amount of emphasis on ensuring that this transition will be a just transition, and that's particularly important for communities in places like the northeast of Scotland, which is so heavily dependent and have historically been on the oil and gas industry. I think what you were saying, Neale, about the transferable skills that the workforce already has. I mean, have you got any other thoughts on how governments, how industry can facilitate that mobilisation of workers into other sectors as and when the time arises, whilst also, I suppose, making clear that, as an industry, the oil and gas industry will continue to need people for decades to come. How do you go about sort of messaging that particular challenge to potential new entrants, newcomers to the industry?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. For us as a university, so, I mean, take a step back. Our research says that close to 1 in 5 people in the northeast of Scotland either are employed in or support the offshore energy sector. So us continuing to provide, suitable and relevant degrees and top programs and providing skills that are actually going to lead to sustainable employment opportunities is really crucial, and it's a responsibility that we have as a university. And then, when we look at the transferable skills, we have to make sure that we're keeping that core content so people have then the capabilities of, going off and yes, an engineering degree. Does that then mean that they can go work potentially oil and gas, but also have the capabilities to enter the hydrogen market once that's developed, solar, geothermal, wind energy, those types of things? For us, it's providing people with the core skills that enables them. And there's obviously industrial elements and differences, and that's going back to what are the slight tweaks and adaptations that we need to make. To do that, all we can do is work alongside industry to find out what additional skills, but also when are they needed. That's the key thing. We don't want to go and develop full new programs, that specific skill areas that aren't going to be required up until 2030. That isn't fair on students to provide them with a degree that potentially doesn't lead to employment opportunities in the near term.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I'd be very interested in your thoughts on how do we, I suppose, assess the competence of that workforce that might then transition into alternative energy sectors. Competence is king within our industry. We at the ECITB have been doing work for a number of years with the operators and the tier one contractors in the upstream oil and gas community to try and look at ways in which we can standardize competence for at base level for certain occupations. And our connected competence program is about it's a program to enable that transferability of the workforce between clients, across sites, and between contractors. How important do you think competence assurance will be to supporting this transition? And I know OPITO have been doing some work in this area too. It'd be great if you could tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, I think it's a foundation. So I've seen, in my experience, a lot of companies, organizations don't even create competency profiles for the roles. So in my opinion, the competency profile is very important in ensuring that they have focused training development within the organization. Now, there are a number of companies which do for their employees, but if you look at most organizations, you get a job description and roles and responsibilities. There's nothing that sits in behind that with a competency profile and a competency framework. And when you have that competency profile for that particular role, it allows the organization then to work towards and deeming that person competent to actually complete the role safely and efficiently. And when we move towards new equipment, new technologies, new processes and procedures, it's crucial that obviously we bear in mind the safety of the individuals in those environments. And with new technologies, for example, the wind, working at height, and they're going to be working offshore in most cases. And the hydrogen, it's a new technology, whether we're on T side using green hydrogen or blue hydrogen, it's going to be a new process for them and procedure. So it's crucial that we understand the competencies required for them to carry out the roles and the daily tasking safely and efficiently.
And obviously your role, Mike, is Global Qualifications Manager. Are you seeing moves in other parts of the world where OPITO operate greater or kind of lesser movement towards really looking to define what these standards will need to be for hydrogen piping design, for carbon capture? Are the UK, is the UK kind of ahead of the curve here, or have we got some catching up to do?
I would say the British standard is still there globally, and especially in Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, parts of Europe and South America. And in my experience and being in this role, we're inviting a delegation across to the UK to showcase one of our colleges who are ahead of the curve for hydrogen. And those delegates are coming from Oman, the UAE, Malaysia and Africa. So they are interested. The interest is out now. All eyes are on the UK to see how we actually transition. Is it going to be a smooth transition, weaned off the oil and gas energy, and how we go about that? So our plan with this delegation is to bring them across, showcase our college that's leading the way with hydrogen, also give them opportunity to understand the challenges that they've faced in rolling it out and preparing it and the equipment involved to actually roll it out.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's great to hear, Mike. And I suppose similarly, Neale, the UK's higher education sector has historically been very well regarded overseas, and RGU and the work you do there in helping industry identify the skills needs that are going to be needed for energy transition, as I've already said, is well established. But also the work that you do in spaces like apprenticeships. Obviously, we know that the energy industry is going to be growing in total over the coming decades. We're going to need new talent coming in. We're going to have to rely on different routes into the industry. I know you do quite a bit of work in the area of graduate apprenticeships in particular. Can you say a little bit more about how important that strand of work is, both to you as an organisation, your organisation, but also to the sector as we move forward?
Yeah, so I mean, graduate apprenticeships are something that the university is really, really committed to. It's, yes, the makeup of the energy sector is, needing a bit of clarity around that, but also the way people learn is really, really different. And we've found, so it's similar to the graduate apprenticeship scheme that we offer, is very similar to the foundation and modern apprenticeship pathways. So OPITO apprenticeships, we have lots of people who have maybe completed those and are looking to continue their education, who want to then continue and join a graduate apprenticeship. It's a way for people to earn a degree while continuing to work. So it's a heavy emphasis on experiential learning. And, we find people who have been in industry for 15, 20 years who never had that opportunity to go to university decide that, for one reason or another, they want to get a graduate apprenticeship. They want to get a degree to be able to, progress job security, enhance job performance. A graduate apprenticeship is essentially, that focus on experiential learning. So in comparison to traditional university programs, you get a much more concentrated volume of theoretical teaching, and the emphasis is upon applying that in real life environments. Now, how that can help the energy sector is that it allows businesses to really take what is important to them, what operations they are, very much engaged in, and tailor their employees' degrees essentially towards what they're working in. So, for example, if someone's doing an engineering degree, the real life experiences they'll be having will be related to if that business is operating within the hydrogen market, if that business is operating within, wind energy. What they're getting or what their experiences are related directly to that sector, which obviously continues to help their development, but as well supports the business. They're fully funded and they're developed through collaboration with Skills Development Scotland and Scottish Funding Council. And what it's really about is supporting and addressing those key national skills challenges, which obviously the energy sector, and as it develops and transition, is a heavy emphasis upon.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Neale. I'm just going to remind our audience that they can ask questions in the chat. And I've just seen one, which I'll paraphrase from one of our guests today, around companies, I suppose, propensity to offer training to their workforce. And this question suggests, gone to an interview for an oil and gas company. The company were only really interested in providing training to new entrants, of beginners, people who are joining the business, as opposed to more established workers. And yet we know how important ongoing professional development, ongoing competence assurance is to the industry. So, Mike, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do face this quite a lot in my travels and I've worked with many major organizations. And yes, it really comes down to budget. At the end of the day, it comes down to budget. Within that organization, I could wholly say that L&D is last in and first out when it comes to the budget within the oil and gas and the energy sector at the moment. But it's definitely a crucial thing that we should be constantly developing. We should have a CPD in place, and the individuals should be constantly developing and training their staff. Every day is a school day. We're there to learn. Nobody's perfect. And as I said, if you had a competency profile for each one of your staff, you'd be able to determine whether they are competent to carry out that role.
Absolutely. And Neale, I just reflected what you said in your response to my previous question around how learner attitudes are changing, and the way in which individuals want to receive training is changing. Obviously, the pandemic accelerated our transition towards forms of e-learning, blended learning. We at the ECITB launched a few years ago what we're calling our learner experiential platform, which is essentially a set of portals for companies to use to train their staff using much more mixed methods of learning. Do you think? What's your perspective on the evolution in learning? Do you think we've kind of reached the peak of kind of online learning, or what are your thoughts on the potential of things like AI to change the way training is delivered in sectors like ours?
I think that it's impossible to go, and it touches a little bit on the previous question as well. It's impossible to get away from the resource challenges that the industry are facing. So, you mentioned financial, but not just that. I think time as well. So there is things. I mean, financial from when I mentioned the graduate apprenticeships, they're fully funded. RGU are a part of NESA, so the National Energy Skills Accelerator, which is a collaborative initiative between ourselves, University of Aberdeen, NESCOS, or North East Scotland College, and that's supported as well by Energy Transitions Unlimited and Skills Development Scotland. And we were awarded funding through the Just Transition Fund last year, and that enabled us to engage with industry and find out what the skills challenges were, find out what they felt the current and future transition needs would be. And from that, we developed a range of short courses. So ourselves, ANESA, developed a range of short courses in those areas that were designed for not just people within industry looking to transition, but people out with industry as well. And over the course of 6 months, we provided fully funded upskilling to around 700 people in areas such as hydrogen, geothermal, wind energy systems. So there is methods and access points there for people to not just learn within work, but also dedicate their own time to those. In terms of AI, we're continually making sure that we keep up with trends. It's really important for us, not just for attracting students, but making sure the students have the capabilities to be able to support future work needs. And AI, as much as we maybe get away from it, is growing more part of that. We actually have a joint venture with KCA Deutag, which is our world-class drilling simulator, and that is a real-time virtual drilling environment that our students use. We have industry partners that use it, so we're already utilizing that at a certain point to help sort of complement our training.
Great, thanks, Neale. And I should also add, just in terms of that previous point about the cost of training, it is a huge issue. We at the ECITB fund training for employees who happen to work for companies that operate within the industry and fund our levy, although I appreciate there are many companies out there, particularly internationally, that don't have such systems, so the incentives aren't quite the same. Mike, just turning to you on the kind of future of learning and learner attitudes towards changes in technology being introduced to learning. Have you got thoughts on that? Similarly, I know OPITO have got a very good, strong e-learning offering, but where do you think that's heading?
Yeah. Well, it's always the question, where is the value in e-learning? Where should I do an e-learning? Is it worth me doing an e-learning? These are the questions that I face, from employers and employees alike. And it really stems and falls down to what's it going to get at? What are you going to get out of it? Where does that fall within your competency path, your development path, and your career path? E-learning, any education, any training course that we attend, I've attended many just like yourselves. Did we use that qualification? Did we use that training program? Where did it actually fit in our life and our career path? So I think a question and using various different technologies, the AI and VR. VR is very helpful for the energy sector, where we can put people into hazardous environments without them actually being there and getting the feel for it, which we done in Iraq. We used to put the local nationals into a VR headset, and we'd walk them around the gas field before they actually went to the gas field. We'd walk them through an inspection, a walk down on the pipelines. So VR is very useful, and we are using it in a number of centres. And within our OPITO centres, they are requesting to use it more and more. We're getting requests coming in. So it all falls down to what we want the learner to get out of it, and does it fit into that whole competency profile within their organisation. Especially, don't waste time having them sit 20 e-learnings when it's not applicable. Yeah,
it definitely has to be driven by the employer, but the learner needs to see the value and the benefit in doing it well as well. Thanks very much for that, both. We're approaching the end of our segment, believe it or not. It's flown by and we've covered an awful lot of ground, but I'll just ask you both one final question, if I may, which is What's the single most important thing you feel that both employers, industry, and government could be doing that perhaps they aren't doing today to address the skills challenge within the energy industry? Who would like to go first? Neale?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. I think that it's a challenging one because it's how long is a piece of string? What comes first? UK government legislation and regulations, or companies forward planning and choosing, and outlining and making a decision. We're going all in on hydrogen, or we're doing X. But what we see as a university is both, industry. Then when we speak to them, maybe they don't have a full picture of where they are going in future, which then has the knock-on effect of challenge for us to be able to complement the needs of that company, of that business, to be able to provide them with the talent that they need. So if we can find a way to get that future planning and skills needs going forward, really cemented, that would allow us to be able to develop courses, programs to be able to meet the future skill needs. It's a challenging one, I know, but from our perspective, that's definitely what would help.
Yeah, sight on the future pipeline, which obviously needs policy certainty and clarity from
exactly, yeah.
Two are linked. Brilliant. Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And we just released our new manifesto from our new COO, Stephen Marcus Jones, where he urges all parties to champion the critical role of the energy workforce in delivering UK net zero ambitions. So that says it all for me. It's working together, communicating together, and as Neale says, coming together, planning, seeing the future. Where is the pipeline? What do we need first? What's the priorities? And there's a lot of crossovers there, and a lot of centers of excellence, if you can call them. There's little pockets of excellence. People's off doing their own thing. We did, just so you're aware, we did create a consortium between the colleges, and so they can communicate and share training material and get our transition qualifications up and running a lot quicker, and also to keep the consistency across the colleges.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. Lots in that answer, and a bit of a rallying call there at the start of your answer too, which is certainly music to my ears. Thank you both very much for your time this afternoon. It's been really, really useful set of contributions and a really interesting discussion. So thank you both. As I said, that concludes the first section of OGV Live skills and training issue today. We're now going to be moving on to the spotlight section, where we delve a bit deeper into what certain organisations are doing on the skills front within the energy industry. And I'm delighted I'm going to be joined, hopefully now on the screen, by three additional participants. Here they come. Fantastic. We've got Craig Smith from Comet, Craig Coutts from Wilkinson Coutts, and also Andy Watson from MRS Training and Rescue. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Really good to see you. Can I start by just asking you all to briefly introduce yourselves and give our audience a little bit of a flavour of the work that you do and the training offering that you provide to clients in the energy industry? And I'll ask Craig Smith from Comet to start.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, David. Really nice to meet you all, and thanks for the opportunity to come along today and speak. It was great listening to that discussion over the past half an hour and some really good insights. My name's Craig Smith. I'm head of L&D and operations at Comet. As you rightly say, David, previously known as STC and CISO. We recently did rebrand to Comet, which I'll come on to in a moment, or during today's discussion as to why we did that. None more so because it's difficult to pronounce and people don't really understand it that well. So, of course, having a brand that's easier to understand is really important. We've actually been in existence, and certainly within this industry, since the mid-90s in different guises. But a little bit more recent to that, we are leading providers of software and people-related services in the space of risk management. Really focusing on people development, leadership development, safety leadership that sits within that as well. So I suppose one of the main things I'm looking forward to get a little bit of a chance to talk about today is what Comet means when it comes to L&D services and the sort of the fairly unique take and approach that we have when it comes to working with organisations to deliver effective L&D. And I think a lot of the things that have been touched on so far, particularly one of the questions as well from the audience, are really interesting about how organisations actually invest in their people through L&D and time and training. And there's some interesting takes on that as well that I'll perhaps get into. But yeah, really great to meet you all, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today.
Thanks, Craig. Can I turn now to Craig Coutts?
Good afternoon. Thank you, David, for having me. A pleasure to be here and nice to meet you all. I'm Craig Coutts, Technical Director of Wilkinson Coutts Engineering Training. We've been established for over 8 years. We deliver training courses in engineering services, predominantly around pressure equipment, static equipment, ensuring the life cycle management of pressure equipment, such as pressure vessels, piping and storage tanks. We provide many plant inspection courses, but also bespoke and customized courses for our clients around not just the UK, but probably about 16, 17 countries, which also includes Australia, New Zealand, and really worldwide now. And we basically try to create an environment that fosters a rich exchange of shared experiences, sound engineering practice to collaborate that knowledge and really try to promote an environment that is really bespoke and individual to that client, to try to get the improvement in their skills and knowledge wherever that may be deemed necessary for that particular client.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Craig. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that in a bit more detail as we move into the conversation. And finally, Andy Watson from MRS.
Hi there, my name's Andy. MRS Training and Rescue are a health and safety training organisation. We specialise in working at height, confined spaces, and a range of other health and safety packages. And we've been operating in Aberdeen now for 2 years.
Fantastic, short but sweet. Thanks, Andy. Craig Smith, I'll start with you. Obviously, you mentioned in your introduction just how important it is for companies in our industry to deliver learning and development effectively in the workplace. I mean, based on your experiences and the work that Comet are doing, what are the kind of key ingredients to success when it comes to training and developing people?
So yeah, thanks for that. I think there's probably I could probably talk all day about that particular topic, but obviously I won't. I'll try and keep it to maybe two sort of key points. I think the first thing is investing a little bit of time and effort into what is actually required. I think we often get called upon to come and assist organisations who maybe are looking for some external support in delivering some form of training or learning or coaching for their people, and they might have an idea of what they want or what they think their people need. That might be for a technical role, it might be for a leadership position, for example, it might be for something new that they're introducing, a new campaign, and they might have an idea as a stakeholder that they think they know what they want, but without a proper diagnosis or understanding of actually what is the underlying issue here, what are we trying to solve or what we're trying to improve upon, then we can actually, companies can spend a lot of time and money and essentially a waste of a lot of that time and money if what they're doing is not properly thought through and thereafter implemented. The training itself can be excellent, the aftercare can be excellent, but if we're not actually tackling the source of the issue or what the actual need is from the outset, and that has to be a partnership with us as a provider as well as who the organisation is, because it's always a little bit unique and different, then how do we really understand if what we're implementing is fit for purpose? So I think the first port of call is, and it's something that we call our diagnose phase of any L&D project, is to properly understand with the kind of key stakeholders, of which there would be very many different ones, what are we actually looking to achieve here? What's the kind of goal at the end of this? So that's the first thing, diagnose the issue properly. And the second thing is probably aftercare. So again, we're passionate L&D providers. There's lots and lots of effective L&D trainers out there for different disciplines and different skill sets. And yet people come along, they have a great day, they get really good engagement, but actually what are they getting out of it? What does it actually mean for them further down the line? What does that benefit actually lead to for both the individual and the organization? Because there's really got to be benefit to both there. So I suppose properly understanding in what environment are people allowed to take their skills into the workplace. It's all very well and good getting that really excellent training or coaching or whatever it may be, but is the organization actually set up for change thereafter? Are people given the opportunity to actually implement those new skills or new behaviors or attitudes to actually get wider benefits? So I think we quite often see an organization wanting to do the right thing by implementing something new or take somebody in like ourselves externally to help deliver a new initiative, but actually are we fundamentally dealing with an issue? Are we building an improvement? And is the organization actually set up to deal with that success, or other words, afterwards? And Sometimes we see some really good examples of that, and other times perhaps less so. So the takeaways for me would be understand the issue in the first place and create an environment on the aftermath where these things can be properly implemented. Otherwise, it can be a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And waste of time for the company, I suspect waste of time for the learners as well. And, just turning to you now, Craig Coutts, I sort of asked this question of Neale and Mike in the previous session, but in terms of the learners that you support in your technical training offering, are you seeing any appetite, much appetite from those learners to see that training delivered in different ways? We're talking a lot at the moment about modular approaches to training, making sure that training schedules fit around the learners and not kind of go with conventional, 2 days, 3 days away from home, from family, looking at more novel ways to deliver that training through hybrid means. What's your sense of, based on the learners that you support, what's your sense of learners' appetite to the way in which they receive their training?
Yeah, good question, David. I think initially COVID really drove a big change in the delivery or the ability to have different platforms for our clients. Initially, all our training was delivered face-to-face. We believe that interaction and that enthusiasm and those shared real-life experiences are probably the best ways to deliver training. It basically promotes a method of sharing real-life stories to try to hold and bridge that gap between knowledge. But with COVID, that took that ability away, and we was out the classroom for probably the best part of 9 months or more. I can't quite remember exactly, but it was quite. It was very destructive to our schedule, like most others. So we had to build then a method to deliver different means, which also included e-learning platforms. So a lot of our training then was developed in e-learning. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And also, you mentioned hybrid. So we have like e-learning with a practical element, where it's face-to-face, and then we also do virtual, just like we're doing now. And we believe that we can deliver the same quality course. You just have to be a little bit more diligent with maybe speaking more clearly, slowly. We get interruptions, just like we are doing now. Put your hand up, whatever it may be, and the virtual platforms. So we had a big, obviously, surge in the virtual and the e-learning because of COVID, but once that ceased and was allowed to interact and be in the classroom, and that restricted movement then was taken away, I do believe statistically, probably around about 65% of our courses have gone back to classroom, because I believe statistically, again, that most people do actually learn or have a greater ability to take that information in and have the ability to interact with you, to ask the whys. That's done face-to-face. But there's still a great desire for virtual and e-learning because, like you said about disruption, a lot of people work away and they've got families and they've got that balance between that work life. And sometimes having the ability to do it from home is a lot more comforting, and without the travel, without the expense, and all those things that go with leaving home to do training courses is sometimes at the top of people's agenda. So it really is spread between the three for us now. So I think because of COVID, most companies have been forced to deliver different means of delivery. And we're probably in a better place because of it, David, because we're basically meeting the needs of people.
Absolutely. And Andy, turning to you, how has your portfolio responded to kind of greater learner kind of demand for more virtual training? Obviously, MRS have a really strong portfolio and things like confined space safety. Some of that is, easier said than done, delivering virtually. Sometimes you have to be in a physical environment to really experience the reality of what it means to be working in a confined space, for instance. But you're really interested in your thoughts on this subject.
We saw it, just as Craig Coutts said there, during the pandemic. We did a big shift into virtual learning. One of our big clients here in Scotland, actually, I came back off furlough for a very quick period of time to help translate some of the courses that we were delivering face to face to them into more virtual, over Microsoft Teams and stuff like that. And although it worked to an extent, I think it met a tick boxing exercise, if you like, from just checking in on competency and people maintaining skills. But once we were able to get back into the classroom, I know there's a lot of value in short duration courses and courses that are perhaps a little bit more theory based, again, as Craig rightfully said, even from a logistics standpoint, virtual courses have its place. But when it comes to high hazard working activities, like working at height, confined space, emergency response, even first aid, you can't beat that hands-on, practical, getting to put into practice what you've learned in the theoretical environment. And to me, even in the age of AI and virtual reality, I still think face-to-face, practical, doing it style training, getting the overalls on, I think that'll have its place for many a year to come.
Yeah, I suspect, as Mike said in the previous session, I think, I know companies are increasingly looking at a sort of a blended approach where they introduce their workforce to the high hazard environment through a controlled setting using AI, virtual reality. But at the end of the day, as you say, Andy, at some point they will need to be, when they're deemed to be fully competent, deployed on a real live site. And being exposed to that for the first time is totally different, or can be totally different. So that it feels to me that a mixture of the two is going to be required going forward.
I kind of found that COVID thrust us into a world, if you like, that the technology wasn't quite there. You were trying to develop interactive packages using things like, for example, Microsoft PowerPoint and Teams, and it kind of got thrust into a situation where making a PowerPoint more user friendly from an interactive standpoint, unless you were an expert in it, it just wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So I thought the standard at the time made it quite difficult. I mean, it might be different moving forward now because software companies have maybe jumped onto it and thought, how can we make this better? But I thought it was a steep learning curve for people who were trying to make a quick fix in that environment, if you like. So I was kind of personally glad that we got back into the classroom quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of questions in. One from Jill Merrilees, who asks, or says rather, can we please see businesses embrace a system of taking oil and gas workers into renewables? We are hardworking, and all we need is product knowledge. And that sort of lends itself nicely to my next question, which is, obviously you all work for leading providers of training solutions. How do you ensure that the products that you offer retain that kind of cutting edge industry standard, in a sense? How do you maintain it? How do you make sure that you're ahead of the curve? And crucially, how do you provide people like Jill and others with that kind of core product knowledge that they need to succeed in the energy sector, whether that's in conventional energy or new energies? Who would like to go first? Craig Smith, shall I come back to you? Do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, and I was reading those questions. It's a really good point. I think people are probably kind of crying out for these opportunities, and again, companies will kind of have a responsibility to be able to adapt to that, and yeah, as of course as providers and external support networks for that, as you rightly say, David, it's going to be down to our responsibility as well to make sure that we're well positioned and primed to be able to offer a service or a set of technical or non-technical training that's fit for purpose. And I think the specific point there is about the change from oil and gas into renewables, and from a Comet standpoint, we work very much in the kind of non-technical space. So working with people around how they deal with change, how leaders deal with change and manage change, how people see those challenges coming forward, how we effectively lead and work with people. So that feeds into a whole other suite of things like resilience and communication. So certainly from our point of view, we certainly have to understand, I suppose, from a starting point, kind of target audience and kind of what those actual needs are. That again, it kind of comes back to my diagnosis piece about really understanding what's needed. So yeah, at least from our point of view, it's about making sure that, okay, what are we looking to achieve here, and is what we have ready to go, fit for purpose, in today's age, in terms of target audience in mind, or do we need to look to refine that with different means of getting that learning across? Both Andy and Craig have touched on that really well. I thought about different means of delivering training, but yeah, we rely strongly on our people to be able to deliver that, and of course making sure that we are making use of the latest content, knowledge, and information that's out there to deliver the most effective L&D program. So yeah, you've got to kind of stay in front. You've got to be prepared to do your research and do your hard work, but 9 times out of 10, subject matter is one thing, but I think if you can deliver effectively whatever that L&D solution looks like, then people will take something away from it, and I don't think that should be undermined. So I can only really talk from a non-technical perspective in terms of what we do, and certainly that's what we would look to try and do. And whether it's oil and gas into renewables or anything else, then those principles have got to remain. So but you're right, you've got to kind of stay ahead of it and make sure what we're continuing to deliver is fit for purpose. Otherwise, we'll soon get back in the queue.
Indeed. And Craig Coutts, obviously you're offering there's a range of technical products there. I assume that part of your role, and I know you'll be looking out there, looking at industry trends, trying to see how changes in industry might affect the evolution of your portfolio. I mean, have you done much? Have you changed any of your products recently in response to this clear appetite from the workforce to be prepared to be able to transition into sectors like offshore wind and renewables, or is this something that you're not quite at that stage yet?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we've discussed significantly through COVID. We developed a course wind turbines and the structure of wind turbines, understanding again anything from damage mechanism identification, construction codes, post-construction codes, using standards for repairs, and using standards for fitness for service to be able to assess types of equipment when you inherently find the damage over a period of time. And that goes for all pressure equipment. And so we did actually morph ourselves and change to the response of the industry. Hydrogen was a big topic in the last 30 minutes, and it's something we're discussing currently, and it's something that hopefully we can then adapt to going forward. So basically we have training led by the industry. It's something we've got one eye on at the moment, David. With the current course portfolio we offer and all the actual bespoke courses that we do for our clients, then it's exactly as you've already mentioned what Craig Smith did, staying in touch with all the changes, all the standards by all the different organisations that produce these publications of sound engineering practice. That's quite a feat in itself, to making sure exactly as Craig Smith said, that it is fit for purpose, and it's having the ability to stay in line with those changes and having the ability to understand them, the whys that go with the details provided by these committees, because not all committees can actually provide sufficient details that suit every environment. There's too many variables to suit these environments. So it's having the ability to do a lot of background reading from the resource documents that are basically used to put the actual standard recommended practice or a code together, and to be able to express them with confidence the ability of why this is in there, why we have this kind of articulated summary. And I think it's the key understanding of why that helps us then validate with confidence the technical reasoning to support our decision-making process in the real world.
Absolutely. And Andy, from your side, looking at your offering, how do you make sure that as a business you're staying one step ahead of the curve, and when it comes to delivering things like confined space training, that you're taking in the very latest industry insights into how that training should be delivered? I think we've just lost Andy. It's a terrible moment for his career. I think you're back in the room now, Andy. Can you hear me?
The ECITB. Yeah, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
We can, yes. Over to you. Can you hear us, Andy? Maybe we'll come back to Andy very shortly. I just saw a very interesting comment in the chat from Andrew Slesser. Andy, I'll come back to you very shortly, but Andrew's asked a really good question about knowledge retention within businesses, and how do we retain expert knowledge from people who leave our businesses and pass it on to people coming up through the business. Retention of the industry is a massive problem. We talk a lot about the skills shortage, and the way in which we can tackle it is by bringing more people into the industry. But equally, another way we can tackle it is by limiting the number of people that leave. But specifically on knowledge retention, Craig Smith, do you have any thoughts on how do you instill knowledge retention practices amongst the leaders and the supervisors that you train?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the angle that we would take as well. There's no doubt that it's a point, and I think even people who are in those positions or situations, they probably feel an element of a little bit of self-security and sort of control when they know they're a particular subject matter expert in something, and they're then the kind of go-to person for that. That's a very comforting position to be in. So, but it's a massive risk for the organisation, who then could lose that, in theory overnight or very, very quickly. So there's an absolute responsibility to make sure, and again, you're absolutely right, David, that it probably is a kind of leadership responsibility to make sure, well, how are we safeguarding ourselves so we don't have one point of failure here, to make sure that we do have that elsewhere. Now, simple techniques through delegation, coaching, mentoring, all these kind of well-known, tried and tested techniques can obviously work and actually shouldn't be undervalued themselves. But again, the organisation leadership have got to understand, first of all, understanding who these people are that might have that kind of dominant subject matter expertise, and then making sure that is without risk to that individual, how we are then sharing that with other people through getting the kind of the younger, the less experienced brought through, and that knowledge sharing. To be honest with you, whether the risk is down to somebody leaving or moving on and retaining that knowledge or anything else, organizations need to safeguard themselves against the risk of that, regardless of what the situation might be of losing that knowledge. And of course, as Comet, that's the space we're in, is about helping organizations manage risk in different ways. So yeah, absolutely, knowledge retention, making sure that there's more than just one point of failure, or we're not just operating a single point of failure setup, is really important. And you're probably right, David. Leadership has a role to play in that. But again, you've got to understand where that risk is and who that risk sits with, and then how we then manage it and share that information within the organization before it's essentially too late. So we've got to be proactive and be looking ahead. You're probably looking years ahead, not just months.
Brilliant. Thanks, Craig. Really helpful. Andy, you cut out just as you were in mid-flow, I think, so we didn't catch any of it. But it'd be really interesting, in your thoughts on how do you stay ahead of the curve in terms of having industry-leading standards, but also this question from Andrew about knowledge retention. There's one thing, training up learners that come through your door, but for the companies themselves, how do they make sure that they pass on that knowledge and they retain that knowledge within the business?
To go back to the first point before my internet ruined me there, as a training provider and an assessment centre, if you like, when it comes to getting people from oil and gas into the other forms of renewable energy, like we really need organisations like OPITO and the ECITB, city and guilds, and any other awarding organisation or standard bearer above us as a training provider and I'll include GWO in this as well, to essentially come to the table and create the standards required to allow people from oil and gas to transition quite smoothly into other forms of renewables. And if these standards and training packages and assessments are available, then organizations like MRS will adopt them and make them available to people to make the transition as smoothly as possible. In regards to Andrew's question, I'll just echo what Craig Smith had mentioned, that it's really down to a leadership team at individual site level to ensure succession planning. They need to be able to think ahead, and it's not a few months down the line and delegating a few little responsibilities to get some stuff off your desk. It's actually thinking about, I'm sat here in Aberdeen essentially because one of my predecessors down at our Fife site in Crossgates saw an aged workforce from the mining industry go through a phase of retirement, and very proactive guy took it from I need to start thinking about what this place looks like 5-10 years down the line, and that's without me here. So he put into plan, although relatively informal, but put in a plan for succession, if you like. And ultimately, we've seen a new management structure come across all our sites in Scotland because of foresight and thinking that it's, but I wouldn't recommend waiting till retirement before you start thinking about it.
Indeed. Yeah.
It's a good idea to, start thinking about succession now. And it's really down to the leadership teams at the individual employers to really think about what that looks like.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. We're coming to the end of our time, but if I may, I'm just going to ask you all one final question, which is, as training experts in your field, what is the biggest development or change that we're likely to see in training and development within the energy industry over the course of the next decade? Who would like to pick that one up? Craig Coutts, would you like to take that one? And then obviously Craig Smith and Andy do pitch in if you've got any thoughts too. But yeah, what's the biggest change or development we're likely to see?
I think a couple of things have been mentioned already, but to reiterate, especially with changing sectors into new industry, wind, hydrogen, but I also think AI will have a big part to play in that over a 10-year period. And I only think we should embrace change, though, and not try to stay back, because you get left behind and it happens all too quickly. So just like looking at the last question, really reiterating that you have to have a plan. I think all companies should have a strategy in place to always look ahead, get together and do your own peer review where you understand the changes. You have to keep one eye on the changes and then look ahead then to try to implement them before it's too late. But I do think AI will play a big role in that, David.
Yeah, brilliant. Andy, any thoughts on biggest change ahead?
I think that within the northeast of Scotland in particular, I think a big, and I'm talking about at our level within confined spaces and working at height, I'm very interested to see how hydrogen, how it's stored, processed, that type of stuff, and how it relates to current confined space training, if you like, as an additional hazard that become more abundant. And I also think the onshore wind turbines, I think we've seen a lull in onshore for a little while. Quite a lot of the focus recently has been on the offshore stuff, but now that onshore seems to have been given the leash has been taken off a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what happens on the onshore wind industry over the next few years at least.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Absolutely. And final word to you, Craig Smith.
I'd agree with both of that. I'll try to keep it relatively brief. I'd love to answer that question, David, without mentioning AI, but I think it's probably quite difficult to do that. So I think integrated AI tools in terms of how people do their work day to day will be a big thing across any industry. So not just, there's probably a little bit of a kind of black smoke around that. And a lot of people will be unsure as to what that actually means, and no one has a crystal ball. But I think how we integrate AI and other learning tools as well, and how people do their work day to day is really important for L&D teams to understand. I think moving away a little bit all the time from formal classroom-based training and understanding that people need to learn in the flow of their work and how they do their work day to day is really important. And I think AI will play a role in how we integrate that and how people can get access at the point in time they need it to critical information without having to sit on a training course will be a big step change. And I don't think we're quite there yet. So I think AI will have a role to play, but probably beyond that, it's more about how we integrate a whole variety of learning tools that people can use at the point they need it, and kind of removing a little bit of the kind of formalized stuff, which will always have a role to play. But I think L&D needs to kind of align itself closer to business operations, and perhaps it is now.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Craig. What a way to end. And I think just reinforces the fact that training, developing your people, if you're an employer in the energy industry, it's probably going to become even more important going forward as we navigate this transition, as we delve into new technologies, and as technologies such as AI change the nature in which training is delivered. Thank you all very much indeed, gentlemen. Thank you very much for some really useful insights. And that brings this edition of OGV Live to a close today. My thanks to all of you who've joined the call and participated, and for your questions. They've been really, really helpful, and I hope you've enjoyed this session on skills and training. I'll just conclude by saying next month there'll be a show at a similar sort of time as this, and we'll be looking at the theme of risk and safety. So please do join that session. Do sign up on LinkedIn. And that leaves me to say thank you very much for your time. Hope you've enjoyed the session, and wherever you are in the world, have a good rest of your day. Thanks very much.